Hey guys, it's Matt. Just a moment before chapter 31, somebody emailed me yesterday, and the question was, Matt, if your understanding of reality, at least in your opinion, is about a half page and it really is that simple, why do you post 5, sometimes more, times a week? And the answer is 3 parts. One, the half page needs to be understood. The half page would be insane to anybody that hasn't been here for 10 or more years without constant descriptions, context, examples as to how reality works the way it does. It has to be understood. It takes a long time for many people. Part 2 is we have all different types of people here. We have new people coming in that don't even understand the basic hobo code. We have graduates going out, all different types of people. And one of my main roles is to try to bring somebody stuck in the bog, maybe a 5th grader, up towards graduate level. I appreciate the graduates still here in the old guard, but that is one of my main roles, to bring people along, get them out of the bog, see what's really going on with the dark part of reality. The final reason is simply a sense of community. A lot of graduates come here still just to feel normal, because where else are we going to go? Just to see that there is like-minded people that are seeing the world the way they are. Chapter 31. Real people like you and me can produce energy on our own. Of course, I'm not talking about calories or what a body needs. A car needs gasoline. Your rent-a-car needs food, water, and sunlight. I'm talking about the energy they call chi or prana, and there are many other names for spiritual energy. We are furnaces of it, and there's a creepy thing in here with us that needs to steal it. This is the reason why it lives behind a trick. Somehow, it seems the trick allows for the best transfer of this sort of energy. Everything the Not Milk does, in some way, is centered around tricking people out of this sort of energy. I did not misspeak. Almost everything it does, hundreds of facets of society, are set up to facilitate its vampiric energy goals. Its need for energy may be its primary motivation in this entire reality system. There are hundreds of manifestations of it in society. It's the reason it forever sends its geriatrics out on stage to play their music with walkers, oxygen tanks, and canes. Almost none of the younger acts can fill stadiums today, so the old jumpin' jack flashes are never allowed to go away. This is why a sun-beaten and wrinkled Anthony Kiedis of the Red Hot Chili Peppers is still running around shirtless, and Flea, the bassist, is often out there naked, endlessly touring on stage, city after city. That egregore is very demanding. Oh, sure, blood, sugar, sex, magic. That's a title that 28-year-old kids would come up with. Yeah, makes sense. If George Michael was still alive today, he'd be shaking his ass on stage between 2 artificial hips. In some way, things called egregores, thought forms, or tulpas are behind the gathering of energy for the asshole dark through these sorts of events and venues. At this moment in time, Taylor Swift reigns supreme as the dark goddess of energy gobbling. There are several reasons for stalled century and why Vanna White will likely turn letters until she can no longer stand. One of the reasons for stalled century related to what we're talking about here is, if a way to harvest energy ain't broke, don't fix it. Aerosmith going back on tour in 2023 as a reliable energy producer for it, as long as Steven Tyler can stay above 90 pounds. Vanna White is approaching something like 45 years, turning letters on the game show Wheel of Fortune. Sure, like nothing else in a half century could have gained more viewers in that time slot. The famous game show almost surely carries an occult meaning that for some reason is very important to the creeps. It's a wheel that may represent living inside the Not Milk rat race. One spin, boom, and the next spin, bust. A trip to Hawaii, ah! And then one spin later, wah, 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 wah. Bankruptcy, you thought you winner, now you loser. We are confident at this point to say, if you play its game, not Wheel of Fortune, the Not Milk's game, society itself, if you play its game, there are no winners, no matter what you spin. Guys, going away from the book for a second, I just thought about this. Anybody over age, in this case, 40, you definitely have to be over age 40, For a long time, Wheel of Fortune, now after you'd win or whatever your money would be, somebody in the old days, $3,000 would be a lot. Then they'd go over to the prizes and they'd spend a minute and you'd pick out your junk. Does anybody remember that? And their little camera would float around over the junk. I want the coffee maker. And is that an oak chest? Oh, cherry chest? I'll take the cherry chest. How much money do I have left? I'll take the Hoover vacuum cleaner. And the camera would float over the junk. And almost instantly, the money you've earned, at least there was a chance somebody could have done something good with it, given part of it to a charity or given part of it as a college education fund for a young kid. It's almost immediately, in the old days of Wheel of Fortune, converted into Rothschild junk. Sorry. When it can't efficiently steal energy, another aspect of stalled century is about putting forth reliable distractions. It will, of course, take as much energy as it can, but it certainly must sense its main purpose for being and its main role in this reality system, which is the same sentence every time: to keep real people from doing what they're supposed to do in this place, spiritually, not materially. The absolute low example of stalled century I've ever come across came up, I think, a few months ago. The 1970s singer Paul Anka, now well over 80 years old, is on tour in Singapore and the Far East. They love him. Those people over there, they love him. They can't get enough of him. Now, guys, let me tell you what just happened to me. Finished the segment, and I'm sitting here thinking, there's got to be, this stalled century, and the Not Nilka is so proud of it, there's got to be a much greater example than Paul Anka. Come on now. And I thought, if there's one pathetic example, the one ring to rule the other rings, who would it be? And it hit me, Tom Jones. And I thought, he's got to be still active. I haven't heard about him. I said, he's got to be still active. That's just the way the Not Nilk operates. Well, what do you think happened? I went out to Wikipedia. Tom Jones, years active in entertainment, 1963 to present. And I went, oh no. He's still Google tour dates. Siri, give me tour dates for Tom Jones upcoming December. London. Then after that, Singapore. They love these old sons of bitches in the Far East. Tom Jones. Now, let me tell you a personal story related to my cousin worked at Resorts Casino in 1986. I'll tell you what happened. I'm living in my uncle's house in Ocean City, New Jersey for the summer. My oldest cousin was a busboy or a backwaiter of some kind in Resorts Casino in Atlantic City. If you were a little bit older, it was a better place to work. For some reason, you go down and work at the casinos, you could make a lot more money than you could like working at a pizza place or wherever in Ocean City. So he had a car, he'd drive down there. One day he comes back, he tells this whole story. He's working in one of the restaurants in Resorts Casino, and one of the managers comes over like, Mike, we drop what you're doing. We need you upstairs. We have a VIP or a high roller or a star. They wouldn't tell him. So they assemble this little staff to go upstairs. Like, what about the group that usually serves the VIP room? Oh, they're there. We have Tom Jones up there. He's going to have dinner with 4 other people. We're like, what do you want me to do? I'm not serving for Tom Jones. No. We just need you to stand around the table. Like, what? He said regular staff is up there serving. They need 4 people. I think he described it as like 5 people standing around the table to be at Tom Jones' beck and call in case he needs something, in case he drops a napkin. I'm not no way joking. Mike told this whole story. He said he did basically nothing with these other 3 or 4 people, just stood around the table in case Tom Jones said, "You, boy, I need a pat of butter," or it was like this show of force. He had to have this mini staff, not the staff that served him drinks and the food, another staff around like he's some sort of king. These people, and they think it's them. They're just puppets to extract energy for the Not Nilk. Tom, are you listening to me, you buffoon? Sorry. We're talking about energy harvesting by the Not Nilk through their thought form demons, their egregores, tulpas, etc. Apparently, these egregores seem to give energy back to these stalled century acts. There's a reason they all keep going. They show an unnatural, unholy level of energy. We'll just leave it at that. So this Not Nilk in society showed all of us a holographic Tupac Shakur and a holographic Elvis live on stage, right? It was like 12 years ago or 15 years ago. There's no doubt they can put a completely lifelike Michael Jackson on stage today in hologram form to sing all his mega hits. On paper, it seems like people would line up to attend such a thing. So we must ask, why is this not done? And as great as it seems, would people attend? It seems like people would flock to see these types of shows with the holographic star, but not so fast. It almost seems like energy sharing in a large concert situation needs two to tango. It almost seems to need entities of real flesh on both sides of the energy equation. We sense their energy harvesting would suffer with a holographic Michael Jackson. But I also get the feeling that, in a way, the people attending want to share their energy with a real performer. That's the key, I think. On paper, the holographic Michael Jackson concert seems like a great idea and a lot of fun. Heck, when he was alive, most people in a crowded venue couldn't see him clearly anyway. In JFK Stadium in Philadelphia during the Michael Jackson Victory Tour in the early to mid-'80s, my cousin and I rocked out to Billie Jean, watching a tiny little speck dance around and jump around on the stage all the way on the other side of what you would call the football field. We couldn't see him. Damn thing was holographic. They could make him 7 or 8 feet tall so everybody could see him. Seems like a better idea. But it seems like the transfer of louche energy needs willing participants on both sides. Thus the reason for the trick. Maybe people would like to sing and dance to holographic Michael Jackson, but if they did so, they would unknowingly keep their energy to themselves, leaving few morsels for the not milk. The asshole dark is able to farm the energy it needs from most people, and because it hides behind a trick, the masses are just fine with having their pooties shoplifted. The great news for us is, once again, we are the only ones who can turn the energy spigot on or off for it. It has no say if it wins or not. It has no say if it gets a dog treat or not. Only you have say. It can't force you to hand over your energy, thus the reason it must operate behind a trick. The screen reaches its hand into your heart-based reality bubble whenever it can, and you must then choose to embrace that hand. It cannot just grab you and extract what it wants. As we've discussed a lot recently, the devil can't just pull over and throw you in the back of his trunk a 1985 Crown Vic. It must offer a fiddle competition with a willing participant. It matters not if the fiddle competition is won by Johnny and the devil seemingly loses. If Johnny even places his bow on a string against the devil for a second, he has already lost. Sometimes it presents itself as a rock concert and takes that kind of energy from real people. Other times, it looks to feed on your negative emotions and fear. Sometimes it gazas the world. That's a verb. About 2 months ago, it gazaed the world. You'll get it in a second. Other times it Chernobyls the world or Fukushima's the world. There are 1,000 event names that we can now turn into a verb. In the past 2 years, it's been concerned with punky boostering the world. It gets up in your business to create irritation, stress, worry, hate, anxiety in entire populations. Why else would a creature like Rachel Maddow be on television? It will Great Depression us on Monday and then 7-Eleven us on Tuesday. We know it also gets something from lustful decadence, debauchery, and the 7 deadly sins. That concept is clearly a stuffed Lenin carried through time because it has to be in order to satisfy some purpose. Either way, you must choose to engage with it and give it what it wants. You decide if you are stressed or angry, or on that day you are willingly going to manufacture the frequency it needs to thrive. There are no excuses anymore. One of the oldest plays in its playbook is getting people to identify with the camps of race, religion, politics, national borders, flags, etc. These were its old standbys for thousands of years. Remember Robert the Bruce from Braveheart? This country has no sense of itself. Its clans war with each other as much as with England. Well, Robert, here's a bit of advice, buddy. He's rolling around. It's the same everywhere inside this not milk life for us. It's not your little clans up by Aberdeen. It's got the whole world doing the same thing. In the modern world, it has expanded its tactics 1,000-fold, offering many more categories of things people can identify with, and movements to join, and camps to get associated with. Personally, I identify with someone who wants to be left alone. It has created camps within camps within camps, like Russian nesting dolls carved to look like gremlins. In 2023, it can't help itself and doesn't seem to care how obvious its tactics have become to the few of us who can see. Its tactics are predictable. We just know the list of letters will just grow and grow and grow. It's now up to LGBTQAI. Does anybody think they're going to say we made a mistake, we're just going to go back to the basics? The pendulum never swings back in this oddball reality. The slicing and dicing of camps along these lines always needs to continue for the not milk itself to grow, thus the reasons for more and more strange names and categories, like two-spirit. I don't know what that is. They, them. I don't really know what that is. Non-binary. Okay, I don't want to keep talking about, you understand I need to stop this. There's more than 31 more flavors. But these groups don't just stop at naming themselves and creating more categories amongst themselves. They turn and point at me. They named me. Keep your names to yourself. Don't point at me. And would you call me cis what? I know cisgendered. That's you. What's that? Once I found that out, I could no longer perform before a woman. When I think of myself as cisgendered when I'm chopping wood outside, for some reason, I can no longer pick up the axe. They use a litany of bizarre terms, like demi-boy, for example, or gender. I got to stop, guys. It's in the book, okay? I'm not kidding you, though, but this is about New York legal terms. New York State has a legal term of butch that employers need if that's what the person wants to be referred to as, or I don't know how it appears on the employment application, but butch is a New York State legal term to identify. And if the employer doesn't comply, I ain't doing that, $250,000 fine. Now let's get back to the basics. Camps equals friction. Friction equals energy. How many more absurd names and classifications will they come up with? Hopefully no more about me. When will the insanity stop? Well, it won't. It doesn't. And that gives reality away. This is the nature of a fake world. Leftist groups in Washington state are suing the old Japanese stop-motion TV show from the early 70s, Ultraman, to force a name change with something that must be classified as androgynous. Right now as we speak, magenta leg warmers are being airbrushed over his silver skin with AI. He will fight the moth creatures over the buildings of Tokyo, being inclusive of all. Bye-bye, Ultraman. There's constant talk about the X-Men being targeted all the time. They already have that cringeworthy scene in one of the movies where Jennifer Lawrence is bitching about why their team is called X-Men when it's the women, doing all the work. So, she says something like that. By the way, was Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique versus Rebecca Romaine Stamos before she was Stamos. Rebecca Romaine Stamos was incredibly good as Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence, thou art a villain. Of course, how it presents its endless camps is not always so strange. It's very good at being subtle. Even to us, thousands of these camps in society seem normal. How could these sorts of groups be sinister? Yet, whenever or wherever there is segmentation in a population of real people, the not milk is served in some way. The Irish Day Parade in New York City certainly is not sinister, right? But it's a camp, and once again, all camps serve the not milk. The Oprah Winfrey Book Club is a camp. The following well-known organizations, of course, all camps: BLM, NRA, NOW, NOW, NAACP, MAD, MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, ADL, Anarcho-Capitalist, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, Brad Pitt Dildo Club. There are thousands of others, all camps. Everything I can think of with a label in society is a camp. Yes, even the term Christian is a camp, in my opinion. Now you've done it, Matt, just like Total Recall, Sharon Stone to Quaid. Now you've done it. Look, same apology applies. I know there are a lot of Christians here. This is or could be my final take on reality, this book. I can't just dance around certain subjects because it could piss people off. I think you'll agree these questions that I raise every so many chapters are legitimate. If you're confident in your faith, there's no reason to think a question is an attack. They should be relatively easy for you to answer. I think you'll find these questions to be legitimate and not an attack. Matt, you going to give that proviso every time? Yeah, there are a lot of Christians here, and for some reason they stick with me. Remember, we're talking about camps. I believe every camp in some way serves the not milk. I believe God can be worshipped without a camp. That's the key here. That's where we hopefully meet on the other end. So let me dive into this so you can see some of the issues that I find troubling. You may not. I'll look to your comments. Inside Christianity, you have a lot of subcamps, things you've all heard of: Baptist, Methodist, evangelical Christians, Episcopalian, Mormon, the Catholic Church, etc., etc., etc. How many more are there? Inside those, or many of those, you have camps inside of camps and more camps, like Jesuit inside the Catholic Church, or spin-offs like Pentecostal, etc. Here's a novel idea that I put forth as my own opinion. You don't need to join a camp to praise who you believe is the creator of all things. You don't need a designation of any kind. You don't need a name that you're associated with, a crest, a seal, incense, a symbol, a certain color. Why do you need those things to praise your God or to praise God? You don't even need a symbol. I'll ask you to think about this. Who decided the symbol of the cross was so important, so necessary? There's no record that I'm aware of that Jesus, his last breath perhaps on the cross, put forth to a few of his followers within earshot to make sure he might say to honor me with this symbol. Did Jesus give that instruction to honor him via the cross? Where did it come from? Think about it. The symbol is of man. A man one day decided on the symbol. Think about that. How do you know who that man really was? What was his intention? Was it sinister? How do you know? I looked into it a bit, or did a little research, and if anybody's screaming, well, you say don't do your own research, I don't have much choice in this case. I had to go to online sources to find out the origin of the cross. What am I supposed to do? Drop everything I'm doing, pack a bag, go off to Jerusalem and spend 6 months digging around? I mean, what am I supposed to do? I don't have any other choice. Okay, maybe there's a lot more here than the Not Milk gave me 10 things. And on like 7 of the 10 that popped up, guess what name was associated with the origin, or why the cross is so important to, say, the modern day Christian? That same creep pops up every time. Oh no, Emperor Constantine, not again. In doing any sort of research, Constantine is at least partially, some sources say like almost all responsible, but at least partially responsible for the promotion of the use of the cross symbolism as it's used today in Christianity. And if anybody's out there wanting to yell at me, I can hear you. I've heard it all before. Matt, don't you know Emperor Constantine was a good guy, and he brought Christianity into the mainstream. See, it was basically illegal before that, and now the sign of the cross was now legal, and he converted to Christianity. You know what? So you have no proof. I ain't got no proof. I'll never will have any hard, tangible proof, but I'm pretty good at this point in not milk tactics, gut feeling, inner tuning fork. I'm sorry. I've believed for a long time that Constantine, thou art a villain. You want to believe that story? Go ahead. Mine doesn't have any more merit because I have nothing other than gut feeling. And the way, again, Not Milk has positioned Constantine. To me, it was the beginning of the positioning for the Catholic Church to become a power monster. That's what it was all about. But that's just me, and we need to move on. Hey, are we going to agree on everything? No. I'm glad you stick with me. There's some more issues. The Christianity part is not done here. I've wondered for a long time, how does all this segmentation inside Christianity work? Which should I pick? Methodist or Catholic? I mean, all this, how does it work from, say, God's perspective? Really think about all the sub-segments and the massive differences between them. Look at the Mormon Church compared to the Catholic Church, and we could just do this all day long. There are some gigantic differences. How is all this sorted out, say, at death from God's perspective? Only one choice is mostly correct, then the others range from very far off from what Jesus or God intended to slightly off. So is there some sort of lesser punishment for being kind of wrong and picking the wrong sub-segment but being kind of close? Will God give a pass to, quote, incorrect Christian denominations? Because how would you put it? They were at least in the ballpark of what was intended and close, even though they didn't hit the nail exactly on the head. See, where do you draw the line on this? If Muslims, according to many Christians, are going to hell for that wrong choice, then does a Baptist or an Amish join the Muslim in hell for that wrong choice? Christians rarely address this. It's not tiny little differences. There are some major differences amongst denominations. Some Christians would think others are complete blasphemy. Maybe they do say they're all going to hell like the Muslim or like the Hindu. I don't know. But, the segmentation and the endless slicing and dicing of camps, that overall is something that bothers me a lot about Christianity. The lack of unity bothers me. Of course it does. All camps to me are of not milk. I understand there's much more to church or going to church than what I'm talking about. A sense of community, trusted friends. Of course, that's all part of it. A unity in faith. I'm not saying to abandon any of that and go live in the woods. I'm just saying or suggesting that why do you need these things of man to adequately worship your God? Of all of these things that in some way are adopted by the different denominations, to me, again, I'm no biblical scholar, and I'll look to your comments. Sorry if I made a mistake, but it only seems that two of the big ones have at least a root in the Bible. Okay, Holy Communion has a root in the Bible. I understand a lot of Christian denominations don't do it, and they argue whether it should be done or not. But I'm just saying, at least you can trace its origin to the Last Supper. Okay, at least you can do that. I'm saying with these other things, like even the symbol of the cross, you can't trace it to anything but of man. A guy somewhere came up with it. Is that good enough? Baptism. Yeah, several references to it in the Bible. But again, the different denominations treat it differently. There are some denominations that say because the Bible never specifically mentions the baptism or the necessary baptism of an infant, doesn't mention it at all, that it doesn't need to be, and the baptism is more appropriate as an adult with sound mind, not the infant. And so there's arguing there. Is the baptism necessary to enter the kingdom of heaven? Over here, yes. Over here, no. Of course, but at least for these things, there's a root to the Bible. Let's pick an example, in this case, the Catholic Church. All the things presented as a necessary part of that person's worship of God that, in my understanding, has no root to the Bible. See, if it has a root to the Bible, I'm not saying that's of man. In this case, that's the more lineage to Christ or to God. Of man is like no roots to the Bible. Some guy somewhere made it up. Okay, let's just look at the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not Catholic, but most of my family is. The Catholic Church in this part of the United States, the Northeast United States, dominates from Boston down through Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Catholic churches are very powerful and very influential in their parts of where they are in the city or in their neighborhoods. I've been in 15 Catholic churches in my life and very few other denominations, just a few here and there for a wedding or whatever. But, my entire family, or at least whenever somebody dies or a wedding, it's always been the Catholic Church, was dragged out to midnight mass, Christmas Eve, things like that. Okay, let's just examine the Catholic Church. The point is all of its presentation, and 98% of it is just some guy somewhere made it up. It has no roots to the Bible. There could be roots in the way the priest is dressed to whatever they consider to be ancient Christian tradition. I'm not ready to go off and do that sort of research, but I'm saying even that in general, somebody made up. But the person sitting in the pew believes all of these things are a necessary part of their worship. And I'm saying, why? How can anything derived from man be an essential part of worship? I'll look to your comments, but I don't get it. But again, we'll go into the Catholic Church together. We'll start with the way Christ is depicted on the cross. I've told this is a very Catholic thing. I don't think most Christian denominations do it. The Catholic Church, I can vouch from experience, Christ is usually not looking good. Moments before death, suffering, bleeding, stab wounds, really looking bad. I hear this is a very Catholic thing. Okay, the stained glass on the windows. Again, I don't think that's in the Bible, but again, all these things of man, certain symbols probably of ancient lineage, whatever, but then there's colors, the way the church is. Where's in the Bible these giant Catholic cathedrals where you could fly a little helicopter around. The thing is so big. I'm no biblical scholar, but I don't think that's in the Bible. Thou must build gigantic churches where you could sail a zeppelin through it. Where's that in the Bible? Hang it, the incense swinging back and forth. Okay, let's get to the big one. Okay, the cross itself, the symbol of the cross itself of man. The hand gesture in the Catholic Church across the chest, creating the cross of man. No, okay, you understand where I'm going with this. And anybody screaming at me, I can hear you. Well, Matt, to have a church and the unity, we have to have things agreed upon as to how we worship. Not everything's going to come from the Bible. These are things agreed upon over thousands of years. Okay, and God understands, if you're screaming at me, I hear you. God understands the intent behind it. In summary, though, I think we would agree. Most Christians believe these symbols or these procedures, or they don't even stop to think about what I'm saying. They believe it's absolutely a necessary part of valid worship. And I'm saying if it came from man, it couldn't possibly be. But let's not forget, this section is about camps, and I'll move on in just a moment. But you want to talk about camps. If anybody ever created a spreadsheet with all the Christian denominations listed, every possibility, through Mormon, the Amish, everything else, things you probably even haven't heard of, then listed on the other axis how they go about everything that people believe is associated with Christianity. Baptism, infant baptism or adult baptism, necessary or not necessary. There's 6 ways just for this. Needed to enter the kingdom of heaven, not needed to enter the kingdom of heaven. Holy communion. Do you do it or you don't do it? Do you drink the wine? I mean, all this different, there's 10 different permutations in each thing. First communion, yes or no? More of a Catholic thing, but what age do you do first communion? In some denominations, it's more in the infant. It would be, 8, 9, 10 years old or something like that for first communion in the Catholic Church. How Christ is presented on the cross. I mean, it can go, the spreadsheet becomes massive and massive. And there's infighting. And guys, I can tell you just one thing. Let's not forget the summary here. With that much segmentation in a religion, I can tell you one thing. The Not Milk loves every bit of it. You know what the Not Milk probably doesn't like? People going off and worshiping God, Jesus. Okay, they might need that in common, of course, for certain Christians, Jesus as the way to God. But we're going to leave all the symbols and procedures of man behind. I bet the Not Milk doesn't like that. Let's move on. The Not Milk's success in the area of promoting gay and transgender lifestyles in the last 15 years has really been something to marvel at. If you were flying by Earth in an alien spaceship, you'd park behind the plasma moon for a few days to study the Not Milk's techniques and how it has transformed a society of billions of people so quickly to, say, quote, bow down before a certain lifestyle. If they're not going to accept it or take it in, no pun intended, themselves, then they need to bow down and give it the highest respect at all times and put it before your own choices. How it has manipulated the existing, say, those communities, both of them, how it has manipulated them and how it has grown its ranks 10,000% is really something to behold. Incredibly, most of your family and friends thinks that what happened is just normal, like organic evolution of where a modern society goes as it advances through time. If I say to them the words, quote, intended and potentially sinister manipulation, they say back to me, you're one of those people. Of course, we know all of this has not been an organic expression or rise, no pun intended. We know for sure it's part of a larger, sinister Not Milk plan. Hundreds of millions of people now believe that their primary way to identify themselves is through the preferred method of having an orgasm. Think about that. Like nothing about them could be more important than, say, the whole of choice. Of course, every camp the Not Milk offers is another way to identify and attach to the material side of the Vitruvian man. Employees on their first day of work in some sort of orientation, after saying their name, will lead with the absurd physical descriptors and make sure everybody knows their preferred pronouns, and will start saying all those sorts of things. Like anybody at your first day of work really cares about what you do with your Washington Monument on Saturday night. If that wasn't enough, most people will now follow with some sort of gender descriptor or pronoun. The first day of work for the cisgendered has become a Frederica Krueger nightmare. People will say, "Hi, I'm Mitch, the new IT assistant, up on the second floor. I'm blank." I don't want to banner it. I'm blank fluid. I'm blank binary, blah, blah, blah. And I go by they, them. I won't use outdated terms by saying, "I work under my boss, Stephen Jones," because that implies sexual submissiveness. And I'm not sleeping with him. Well, not yet, at least, baby. Someday, though, he'll long to be working under me, if you get my drift. Now, I assure you, this inappropriate outburst during orientation would receive no punishment whatsoever. Remember, the whole of the world bows down to it now. The only repercussion or punishment would come from people like me, who would complain about what was said to HR. Then those cisgendered meanies who complained would receive mandatory sensitivity training. Yes, the plumber's ass crack that hangs over the natural world, that screws real people out of their spiritual energy, has been highly successful over the last few decades. For most people, their life is the road most traveled, and it has not made all the difference to that side of their Vitruvian man. If you react the way it wants, emotionally, then it wins. It cares not who is right or wrong, simply that you choose a side and manufacture its needed friction. To evoke this, its presentation can range from absurdly fake, by our standards, to real, and it can still get what it wants. If what's on the news is actually real, it still, in many cases, finds a way to use the real situation to feed itself the type of energy that it wants. There have been real events that the truth community were meant to believe are cake in a lake by the not milk, inserting mistakes on purpose. This is done to further isolate people like you and me, and once again, to create more camps. They have inserted obviously fake elements into real events many times now. So we become, once again, the boy that cried wolf, yelling, "Fake!" all up and down the Thanksgiving table, when in this example, the event was real, yet to us meant to look cake in a lake. Yeah, real meant to seem fake. Now, I agree, this is not their normal playbook, but it has happened many times. To a percentage of our truth community, suggesting this is likely the case and it can happen is truth or blasphemy. To them, no event can ever be real and then used or exploited by the not milk. A country with 400 million guns and a million crazy nuts running around on the street can never, ever have a real shooting that hurts anybody. That's unthinkable to the first grade truther, especially if the number 33 shows up. Regarding what we recently talked about, for example, the hate has no place here type of stuff and that endless mantra for 5 different groups now being targeted and the stuff we've been talking about, there are a few real events, no doubt about it. But the news runs with those events and magnifies the perception of what's really happening. In this case, say 10 date chimes, 10 real date chimes, is thought to be, by the population, thousands of date chimes, because that's what the news and the New York Times and Fox gets everybody to believe. The asshole dark laying over reality needs polarization, duality, and emotional friction to exist. I remind you once again of the great news. It can't get what it wants without your willing participation. This fact is the best case of all time that free will exists. You know that age-old discussion comes up in our community about free will. But if it doesn't exist, why is this giant infrastructure we call not milk, the outer screen or outer ring of reality, why is it trying to play this trick if we don't have free will, everything's predestined, preordained? See, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm more on the free will side of things. You create your own spiritual energy or chi, and the not milk knows it. Most people in the society, in the masses, don't even have any idea that that arm of the Vitruvian man exists. So it puts millions of things in front of us to try to get some of that energy. We could do 87,000 books on all its tactics, but we'll do 1 or 2 here. Things like pro-life hating pro-choice. A tiny example of what it's crafted to draw tidal waves of energy to wash over itself decade after decade. It has recently, as we know, overturned Roe versus Wade, so it can recreate the same conflict in the same manner over and over again. Of course, there's nothing legitimate about the Supreme Court. Everything at that level is always part of the long-term not-milk script. The 9 puppets do as they're told, just like all the other minions whose names you know. For those who were unsure about the court a few years ago, the Supreme Court was given away as 100% cake in a lake by John Roberts during the Obamacare debacle. Remember that mess and horse shit? Perhaps the overturn of Roe v. Wade in 2022 will save lives in the opinion of some, at least for a while, or while the current situation exists. But only a fool would consider the overturning of Roe v. Wade a real victory. I assure you, it was all part of a not-milk long-term plan. It will often choose to take a step back in order to appear real and legitimate, in order to then take 2 slithers forward. In the end, it will never make a decision that benefits the life, health, or well-being of real people over the long term. I think sometimes it must do these sorts of things that seem like wins in order to again take 2 steps forward later. Just think how many millions of family members had a nasty argument over the recent Roe v. Wade decision. Someday those who see what's really going on may pose important questions like this and say, hey, is there a way to measure loosh exchange? Something similar to the BTU or the British Thermal Unit measures heat? But maybe we can have something like the LEU, the loosh exchange unit. And there can be little meters where you can, at the end of the day, you can get your 10,000 steps on your wristband, but you can, your loose exchange meter, your LEUs, it'll say 0. You say, look, Ma, I gave up no loosh today. Bill's already starting the poster. Bill just made a poster mocking the Christie's Rothschild auction. And even as that piece of shit painting, the Baroness d'Alphonse or whatever, he's got somebody hauling in and out that piece of shit painting that they own. What'd they get for that? $50? They got over $1,000. To them, it's like getting a nickel. The See the V event of 2020 created more friction for it than anything else in recorded history. From its perspective, it was a loosh beach blanket bingo. One tactic to get what it wanted was to put cake and a lake elements inside the See the V story and present the absurdities for our community to notice first. Let's not forget the Chinese workers in January of 2020 wearing full hazmat suits, spraying disinfectant all around them up into the air, like everything under the clouds can be sanitized. That's as absurd as the shark repellent that was in the 1970s Batman movie. He was climbing the ladder up to the helicopter, and the shark was on his leg, and he pulled out shark repellent. That's what the Chinese did in 2020. Let's not forget how we saw a full busload of workers in Guangzhou, I think it was, wearing full chemical suits while the bus driver was maskless wearing a T-shirt. I think it was Motley Crue. As usual, they were counting on our community to notice the lunacy of their presentation and then to make videos about it in response. Of course, we did exactly what it wanted under the delusion we were catching them in the mistakes. We were catching them in the act. Oh, what sleuths we were, proving ourselves once again to be the Sherlock Holmes of the new age. The Not Milk loves what we do here because in the end it creates friction and camps. The first grade truther thinks they fear being found out and they shake with fear when we threaten our research. Friction and loosh is the reason they never wanted more than 85%. That's my estimate. Some would say 80%. They never wanted the whole population in the West to rent the movie Action Jacksonation with Carl Weathers bot. They don't like homogeneity because that does not create energy. Only camps does. This is the reason they had Tucker Carlson on Fox every other night talking about how harmful everything was. And they watched the numbers very carefully. If too many people were getting it, then they sent out the Robert Kennedy Jr. so they could manage it back. See how that works? Sorry, old man in your chairs. It's not interested in blanking off the entire culling of a population. It's not interested in eliminating its energy source. And a big segment of the truth community will get all upset at me and get their back up and say, look, guys, I knew he's defending it. Look, no, you guys use the word genocide, okay? You understand what that word means? Look around. Every one of my old fat relatives is still, yeah, there were some issues. You don't think there's going to be issues when 20 billion vials if you include all the punky boosters, 20 billion vials of different sorts of chemicals are put in billions of people. No, there's not going to be any events at all. Not thousands of events you can look at. You use the word genocide. Do you understand what that means? Was it Mao's Cultural Revolution? Is that what we just went through? Of course there were events. That does not mean genocide. I mean, how desperate to try to combine those things. For some reason, the Punch and Judy show of Republican versus Democrat still works today. I'm not sure the Not Milk expected that old rusty engine to start back up in 2023, preparing for the 2024 November 5th election, but she's still running. As people get dumber, the same old tricks still seem to work. The Archies and Jugheads of America keep going back to the political well to drink the same spiked punch. Duality and polarization are not just constructs of the Not Milk society. These are the dynamics of reality itself and extends to the four corners of what we call the universe. By itself, this duality is not evil or anything to be shunned. It's the structure of this place and should be appreciated by us from time to time, and its role understood while we're here, not to be run from or feared. Take the sun and the moon, for example. They almost certainly work together to make this physical reality possible. You didn't really think one was a big round rock and the other thing is a 13 billion year old burning thing in deep space 92 million miles away, did you? That's ridiculous. Carl Sagan is either a Not Milk puppet or a delusional grass-fed bison rancher. Two orbs in the sky of the exact same size, sliding over each other every few years in perfect unison during an eclipse. I'm sorry, I don't believe in probabilities of 1 in 500 billion or greater. If it was only 1 in 200 billion, I probably would believe it. But it's closer to 1 in a trillion that could happen if these were just planetary bodies and things moving around. So you can believe it if you want. I don't. You think there's any members of the Palace Guard out there listening to me that would like to inform me about perspective? What? Perspective? Oh, wait, you're not. One is 400 times closer and one is 400 times bigger, so it just seems like they're the same size. Oh, I made a mistake. What was I thinking? I'm going to delete this video and shut the entire channel down. Real spirits like you don't need to lie, steal, and deceive to collect up energy as they do. If chi energy or the spiritual essence is a Kit Kat bar, then they're Halloween bag stealers. I doubt our type of incarnation needs to gather this kind of energy at all. And there's a certain energy related to soul and spirit that we have that they want. As I said earlier, I'm not talking about caloric energy that comes from cheesesteak wit. I'm talking about the sweet ambrosia from their perspective. The sweet ambrosia to Not Milk is your spiritual energy. You produce it, George Bush shoplifts it. Our main power plant is likely not even here in this snow globe, and they're very envious of it. If not, why are they getting up in our business all day long trying to take it? The screen, or the outer ring of reality, is like Lefty the salesman from Sesame Street. On the TV show about once a week, Lefty tried to sell Ernie some worthless piece of shit. Like Lefty, the Not Milk has nothing of any value to offer a real person like you and I. Lefty must deceive Ernie to make his sale. On one episode of Sesame Street, Ernie was actually tricked by Lefty to buy air in a bottle. When Ernie handed over the money, Lefty didn't even give him the bottle. He dumped the air out of his hand and then took the bottle back. That's so Not Milk. Ernie was very pleased with his purchase, as the retards are on Black Friday. I hear what you're saying, though. That's just a dumb show on TV for kids. Nobody could fall for something like that. Sorry, people fall for air in a bottle every day. They actually believe the news, and most of that is propaganda, which in turn is a thing of no substance. That's air in a bottle. Actually, Not Milk propaganda is worse than Lefty's air in a bottle. Ernie was ripped off by Lefty, but in the end, all Ernie lost in that was a nickel. Those who believe in the New York Times and produce an emotional response to its Gaza striptease are giving away something far more valuable, their chi. I don't like most of the dumb names assigned to spiritual energy, common names like prana. We need a new name, and we'll work on it. I assure you, Ernie on Sesame Street is far shrewder than the modern-day Homo sapien sapien, and that stupid puppet on the TV show bought air in a bottle. Lefty, taking the form of the Not Milk, can't pull something out of his raincoat and force us Ernies to buy his air. The Not Milk must always lay down a trick and gain our consent to get what it really wants. The key is to get what it really wants, that sweet ambrosia. Sure, it can build a highway right through the middle of our town and piss us off, but that doesn't give us what it really wants. It can irritate, it can do all sorts of things, but to extract what it really wants, it must operate behind a trick. I'm convinced of that. I know we've been talking about its ability seemingly to do direct harm to certain types of people or entities, and what is tricked or not. We've been talking about that. It seems like, though, it can draw far more energy or whatever it really wants by operating behind the trick, and maybe gets far less with direct harm. But again, we'll talk about what we've been talking about later. The most recent not-milk trick of massive significance, of course, was See the VME of 2020. Now, we certainly hope it's on some creepy-ass 20-year astrological cycle before they can replicate that size turd again. Every few years, it seems, it can play medium-sized games like gazing and turning other nouns into verbs, like Chernobyling every so many years, Fukushiming, or 3 Mile Islanding. What? That was a meltdown in Pennsylvania, Matt. Completely legitimate. Oh, what was I thinking? What was the Jane Fonda's The China Syndrome movie comes out a few weeks before the real... Well, I'm sorry. I'm one of those people. We see pretty clearly now that they are emotional 3-card Monte dealers, and their card games never end. Their tricks are effective on 99% of the Soylent Green population. The people around us have decided willingly to give it what it wants. They don't see a trick at all, and at the end of the day, they're quite pleased with society. Each ruse seems to have its own lefty in the story. In 2020, it was that little goblin, Dr. F, starring as Lefty. Amazingly, most people today buy Dr. F's story about air in a bottle freely and feel very good when they followed his idiotic instructions. Then they proclaim to each other, like caring Karen assholes, "Stay safe!" It's just air, but people think they've bought something valuable because Lefty, as the CDC, said it was valuable. The granola crunchers in Vermont have placed the air that they bought from Lefty in carbon-neutral safe deposit boxes made of recyclable material. Incredibly, the new punky booster from Moderna is called SpikeVax. Ugh. That's the word they chose to base a $100 million advertising campaign around? How much did they pay their advertising agency to come up with that piece of shit? Well, Matt, it has nothing to do with successful marketing. You yourself should know it has a very negative and sinister connotation that hits the unconscious and subconscious mind. Pootie Tang Award. Wada-ta, my tabby. Get your dillies on the runny kind, Dr. F. That's literally what was sold to the world in 2020, air in a bottle. But it was said to be diseased air. The bottle was simply labeled as a deadly walrus, and people took authorities' word for it and took authorities' word to its severity. The people who were tricked chose to be tricked, but it's not one-sided at all. Both parties must come together in a car battery to make the spark. It takes two to tango, which is a stuffed Lenin phrase because it carries another layer of meaning. The Asshole Dark knows how this reality works and knows exactly what buttons to push and what levers to pull to get what it wants from a population of Ernies. I wish Sesame Street was still doing the Lefty to Ernie skits. They could recreate 2020, and we could just do it right now for a minute. Just, "Hey, bub." I can't do Ernie. So it'll sound something like Yoda. You hear about, "Hey, bub. You hear about the diseased air all around?" Yeah. I've got the cure, bub. You do? Hey, would you want the Pfizer or the Moderna SpikeVax? How much? Just a nickel, bub. In summary, the nature of its trick, as usual, is to get real people to play its game by taking a side. When that happens, people pile onto either side of the magnetic poles, and their emotions, like hate, for example, produce a not-milk aurora borealis. The org chart of the Asshole Dark goes down many levels, and most branches have no idea how they're serving the part of reality that needs to feed from real people. The billions of people who bow down to authority are simply like cells in the overall body who can't see the whole of what is playing out on Earth. Almost none of those who serve it is getting instructions or secret orders like the first-grade truthers believe they are. Those on the frequency simply do what the not milk wants. All but the top minions believe they're doing the best they can for society and are very happy with their societal contributions. The minions, who are so-called experts in their respective areas, are big fish inside a little pond, but those in the pond can't see or comprehend the ocean itself. It's possible even Neil of the Grass-Fed believes in Carl Sagan's model of the cosmos. That dope probably believes in every bit of it. The asshole dark is most adept at taking malcontents like you and me who are beginning to, quote, wake up and marginalizing them. That just means it's good at making us look bad. It identified our ilk a long time ago, just as the old woman in They Live yelled at Rowdy Piper, "We got one who can see." That's you and me. It has a defense mechanism to distract us and throw us off the correct path, while stealing our energy and making us out to be the boy who cried wolf in our peer group. What a worthy adversary this son of a bitch is. If you were the captain of a kickball team, you would pick this asshole first. So when decades go by and we in our community never get a win, we don't consider that maybe reality itself is not what we believe it to be. And even inside our own community, my sort of thinking in this regard becomes very fringe. People don't like that. People like to blame a bad guy that's very real. And if it wasn't for that bad guy, your life would be wonderful. No, sorry, reality isn't designed for that, where the big win will come home and everybody will sing Kumbaya. Reality is designed for the continual struggle. In my opinion, it's the way it was designed before you came in here, why you signed up. We have enough examples at this point that pretty much clearly shows us reality is not what even the middle school truther believes it to be, something far different. No arch criminal ever goes to jail. Hillary can throw a server in the closet and delete 33,000 emails, and we still keep researching and wondering, when are they going to get these people? India sends a popsicle stick to the dark side of the moon that looks like elementary school anime. Nobody's suspicious outside of our little group, and we keep investigating, keep looking for that big win. Each election cycle, the politicians they put up are even more inept than the ones before. Or if the individuals are the same ones they're putting up, they've gone even more insane. Yet the people believe this is modern politics. And as usual, we keep researching and keep trying to show people that things are not what they seem. We keep looking for that win. Of course, we should have stopped looking for a win, realized what the nature of reality is, and walked away from all of it years ago, withdrawn our attention in its entirety. When certain conspiracy presented to us gets old, dark reality is somehow able to spawn new and fresh topics. Obviously, only a false world could do that. Massive conspiracies called Mudflood and Tartaria just kind of showed up around 2015. So let me get this straight. There was a massive world event that covered millions of square miles of hot pyroclastic mud that could have potentially killed millions of people in this sort of catastrophic event, and nobody noticed this until about 2015 or so? Well, no, Matt. They knew about it, but it was covered up like the dirt over my underground basement windows. Oh, I see. The thousands of archaeologists and excavators who over decades noticed these extra layers of mud, dirt, silt, strata, sediment were all, here we go again, were they all paid and threatened to keep quiet? Oh, no. Not that shit again. My house has basement windows. Zara sits in one. Was my house mud flooded? Is that in the insurance policy? I'm not picking on these researchers. In general, they are our brethren and brothers. I appreciate that they don't blindly accept what Ivy League professors tell us in the history books. What happened to these researchers, in my opinion, though, was they simply found the breadcrumbs that were laid down before them by a false reality. Yeah, I'm putting it that simply. That's very hard for many in our community to accept, but in my opinion, it's been definitively proven over and over at this point. How many times can we keep going through the same thing? The reality has completely given itself away in this point in 10 major areas. Ignore all the evidence or make excuses for it if you want. Most in our community are addicted to focusing on the bad guy or addicted to focusing on the fascination of the next conspiracy. I agree. I like looking at it myself. Me saying fake world softens it up a bit and puts the minions more in the position of role players, and they don't like that either. They want to hate. They want to blame the bad guy. They are addicted to the truth research breadcrumbs that it will continuously generate. Someone named Frank recently wrote to me. He said, people want something to blame their condition on. Moving from the physical, Matt, to the spiritual will eliminate a lot of your audience. Being spiritual eliminates mass. And then the being finds itself responsible for everything itself. You'll lose listeners if you go the route that people should take responsibility for everything themselves. Well, Frank, I appreciate that, and that's very nicely put. But worry about yourself. Worry about yourself has been around this channel a pretty long time. I think the messages are similar. Of course, I don't think like mudflood researchers or Tartaria researchers, I don't think they're working for anybody or they're like trolls. I think they're generally trying to do the best that they can, like I said. Reality researchers have to take a step back, though, with a different perspective. Go to 100,000 feet and look down in order to understand what they're dealing with here. Strange links, endless connections between events, backlinking. It's impossible in a real world. Look at the backlinking between, remember the Kobe Bryant, what happened to him, and the next event. You had all these backlinking. You have huge backlinks and channeling between the big event in 2001 and 2020. I mean, to think that's all planted 30 years in advance in some cases is ridiculous. It's a symptom of reality itself. We need to wake up to it. Now, these researchers either don't notice some of the things I'm saying, or per the comment that I just read from Frank, they don't want to notice it. In short, most truth researchers believe the world is too real. Again, I reference what Frank said and the reason they believe that. Well, Matt, you explain it then. You tell me what happened in this case or in this conspiracy or in this example. You explain it then, you genius, you son of a beach. Sorry. To demand those types of answers from me and thinking I will even give them to you is not to understand a thing that I'm saying in these chapters. To actually graduate is to no longer care about anything happening out there and to turn to in here, part 2, the work. I mean, we can so clearly see that. The conspiracy of the month, is that out there or is that in here? Part 2, the work. Is Tartaria out there at the screen, or is it in here, the work? Is Mudflood out there? So if you go out there, so you're not giving your energy to the Not Nilk in any way, you're just researching Tartaria, and the Not Nilk has nothing to do with that. Really? Is anybody not seeing how it's all Not Nilk if you turn your attention out to the screen? It doesn't matter if it's a Kit Kat Dash or a heavy block or a cathedral. If your attention is out there, you are doing what it wants. That's all it cares about. It is a half page. Thanks for listening.